Dr. Tan Wu Meng.
Mr. Speaker, today I will speak on the climate crisis and our climate ambition, our energy security and our survival. Last year I spoke about Singapore's burning platform, a world on fire with COVID. With natural habitats being destroyed, we must expect more pandemics, some worse than COVID. But climate change is a graver challenge than any disease. So we need to stress test our assumptions, test our plans for the future before the future tests us. And so we need to move quickly and boldly. An earlier generation spoke of mudflats to metropolis in one generation. It happened. And now we face a new ambition, again born of necessity and survival. Can we go from carbon positive to carbon neutral, from what is unsustainable to what is sustainable within one generation? Because that is the implication of reaching carbon net zero by the middle of this century. There's not much time, and we need to be seriously bold. Because the climate crisis is about Singapore's survival, whether we stay above water. In 2019, a research paper in the journal Nature Communications showed very vividly with maps how hundreds of millions of people around the world will be underwater by the end of this century, and that's just assuming a low carbon emissions scenario. It's our economic survival too. In a world where carbon border adjustment taxes are being talked about, in a world where consumers choose what to buy, where to work, how to invest based on sustainability, in a world where narratives can shift from free trade to sustainable trade, we need to be ready, and it means Singapore needs to raise our ambition to stay above water, to survive, and to thrive. And we can only do this fast enough within one generation by moving boldly and ahead of the market. Mr. Speaker, our climate response must stand up to stress tests. Let me say that again. Our climate response must stand up to stress tests. Energy security for a carbon-constrained world, pandemic security for a world with new diseases, social security to ensure a just transition. All this links up with our total defense. Because if Singapore is underwater, if we can't keep the lights on, we're not even going to be at the starting line in a challenge. If we're laid low by a pandemic, or our people are splintered and divided, we're not going to be able to deal with whatever threats come our way, kinetic or otherwise. I spoke on pandemic security during last year's budget. I've spoken on social security over the years. Today, I will focus on our energy security. Mr. Speaker, energy security has been a big issue around the world in recent years, and especially in recent days. Energy security is existential for Singapore, not just keeping the lights on in our hospitals, in our homes. It keeps our new water plants, our desalination plants going. Our water security depends on our energy security. We know what it means if Singapore's water supply is ever called into question. And we need to think about energy security that way too. Today, from public domain data, about 95% of Singapore's electricity is generated using natural gas. Supplies by pipeline, also LNG terminal, but it is still almost all natural gas. 95%. Some would say it is a serious concentration of risk. Recent events around the world, market shifts, events in Eastern Europe are a reminder of this. Electric vehicles will further concentrate this risk because EVs also draw energy from the electricity grid. But if the pandemic has taught us one thing, it is that we need to move from just in time to just in case. And there is a case for Singapore to further diversify our electricity sources and to do so ahead of the market for energy resilience, energy security, also to reduce our carbon footprint as part of the climate crisis response. Sir, there's no illusions about it. There is a price for just in case. There is a cost to preparing in advance for danger and for crisis. But by strengthening social support in a progressive way, we can help Singaporean families even as Singapore proceeds through a necessary transition, a just transition. Sir, so how do we diversify our energy security, reduce our climate footprint, raise our climate ambition? Solar is part of the solution, but Singapore's small. We're solar constrained. Even with solar photovoltaic panels on every building rooftop, on every external surface of every building, solar alone would not be enough. Regional power grids can be useful, but they do have limitations. When there's an energy crunch, some regional grids will come under the same market pressures as our own. Even if you use an undersea cable, an HVDC, high voltage direct current transmission line, that line is still one underwater dredging accident or incident away from being unplugged. So we need to look at other options too. In July 2021, I had asked in Parliament about Singapore's potential as a hydrogen hub, in particular low-carbon hydrogen, and whether we should move ahead of existing market conditions. We already have established capabilities in the energy and chemicals sector and in transshipment. And Mr. Speaker, indeed, there is already interest in hydrogen around us and in the region. Reuters news agency recently reported that a Japanese-Australian venture has been testing transport of hydrogen using a ship as a liquid hydrogen carrier. They reported that just this past week, a Japanese-built ship, the Suiso Frontier, delivered the world's first long-distance liquefied hydrogen cargo from Australia to Japan. Early days, but proof of concept. American think tank CSIS, in October 2021, published a commentary. They assessed that Australia by 2030 could well be, quote, a major player in global hydrogen production and trade. Their green hydrogen, when exported, will need to be shipped to destination markets. So the question is, which cities in Southeast Asia have the potential to be a hydrogen hub in the hydrogen economy? Is Singapore among them? And if so, do we want to be first mover, second mover, or too late to move? Moving ahead of the market will help Singapore build capabilities, reduce the risk that will be left behind. Starting up hydrogen-based electricity generation and fuel cell capacity will help us build the experience to scale up when we need to, because the most difficult step is going from no capability to having some hydrogen capability. On other developments, Mr. Speaker, we should also keep a very close watch on developments in nuclear energy, both fission as well as fusion. The International Energy Agency in 2021 observed that nuclear power output avoided about 55 gigatons, 55 billion tons of carbon emissions over the past 50 years, nearly equal to 2 years of global energy-related CO2 emissions. For nuclear fission, we should continue assessing the safety of small modular reactors and whether a future generation of small modular reactor can be safely deployed in the Singapore context. We should keep on looking at this. For nuclear fusion, it is still early days, but promising prospects. In December 2021, a team at the Joint European Torus jet facility near Oxford generated 59 megajoules of energy for 5 seconds, enough energy to power 35,000 homes for those 5 seconds. Again, early days, but notable developments. So we need not decide yet, but we need to understand and build analysis and skills regarding these evolving and emerging technologies so that when the time comes, Singapore can make informed choices, even hard choices, about these new energy technologies. Mr. Speaker, when I was born, the global carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, was 333 parts per million. Today, you look at the Keeling curve, the CO2 concentration, 420 parts per million. Still going up. Climate crisis, still ongoing. Singapore needs to be ready. In last year's budget debate, I said, we must also ask ourselves, beyond what is possible today, what is necessary for tomorrow? What do we need to do that we cannot yet do? Sir, the climate crisis and our climate ambition means we need new capabilities for our energy security and our decarbonization. Necessary dreams as we face up to necessary realities. I stand in support of this budget.